Hey guys, tonight we wander back through the narrow lanes of an ancient city, and you find yourself waking just as the sky shifts from black to a pale wash of gray. A stray rooster crows somewhere off in the distance, though you swear the thing sounds more confused than proud. A dog barks twice, then gives up, and there you are, lying in a cramped little room. The kind where the ceiling is low enough that if you stand too quickly, you'll probably knock your head and blame the architect for eternity. Don't worry, you probably won't survive this. But hey, neither did most of them, so you're in good company. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with where you're listening from. And the local time, you'll see just how weirdly international this sleepy little crowd has become. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice in your tiny chamber is the smell of smoke. Clinging to everything, the fire from last night's little clay hearth has long since gone cold, but its ghost lingers stubbornly in the rafters. You shuffle across the uneven wooden floorboards, the ones that creak in a way that makes you feel like you're sneaking around, even when you aren't. Outside your door, the city is just beginning to stir, though it's hardly the peaceful kind of morning you'd dream about. You open the shutters, if you can call those warped wooden planks shutters, and take in the early haze. Down in the alleys, a few vendors are already dragging carts into position. Wooden wheels groan under the weight of baskets filled with yesterday's bread, bundles of herbs tied up with twine, and slabs of meat that make you hope refrigeration was never invented for a reason. Somewhere across the way, a woman yells at her husband to hurry up with the donkey. And the donkey, predictably, answers with a bray that sounds more sarcastic than obedient. You wander out, stepping carefully to avoid the puddles left from last night's brief rain. The ground is a patchwork of mud, straw, and things you'd rather not identify in polite company. Welcome to city life in the ancient world. Glamorous, right? Still, there's an odd charm to it. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the anticipation of the market is already pulsing through the streets. It's not just about buying food. It's about the whole rhythm of daily life. Markets weren't supermarkets you dipped in and out of. They were the heartbeat of the city, and the beat started early. Merchants needed every bit of daylight they could squeeze out, and buyers wanted first pick of the freshest goods. You imagine someone in a toga or rough wool tunic, thinking exactly what you're thinking. If I don't get there first, I'm going to end up with the bread that tastes like someone left it on the roof for 3 days. A scholarly debate still lingers about how formal these early openings were. Some argue there was an official bell horn or some ritual to mark the day's trade. Others claim it was more organic. Merchants simply showed up when the sky got light enough to see the scales. Either way, the result was the same. A slow trickle of bodies filling the square, until suddenly it was alive with a chorus of footsteps, wheels, and chatter. By now, the smell of the bakery ovens drifts lazily toward you. The loaves are coarse, heavy things, closer to what you'd call a brick than a baguette. But to a hungry city dweller, they're irresistible. And the bakers? They've been awake for hours already, working in heat so fierce that stepping into the street afterward feels like walking into a cool bath. You picture them, tired-eyed, passing bread through narrow windows to early customers, clutching little copper coins. Oddly enough, some ancient bakers had the reputation of being minor. Celebrities, people, actually carved graffiti praising or mocking them on walls. Imagine being roasted on social media, except it's literally chiseled into stone. As you drift along with the small crowd forming in the square, you notice the rhythm of the city settling into place. Merchants grunt as they hoist crates into place. Children dart through with errands, and the first buyers eye the stalls like hawks, pretending not to care while secretly planning their pounce. The market hasn't officially begun, but the day already feels alive with a quiet tension, an energy that says, here we go again. And you, of course, are just another body in the stream. You adjust your cloak, or let's be honest, that itchy wool tunic, and follow the murmur toward the heart of the square. The air is thick with wood smoke, donkey sweat, and the faint sweetness of figs. You realize the ancient city wakes not with alarms, but with layers of noise that build and build until they become impossible to ignore. For now, though, it's just the beginning. The shutters are opening, the wheels are rolling, and the hum of the market is beginning to rise, promising both monotony and mystery in equal measure. You can feel it. You're part of the machine now, whether you like it or not. You follow the sound before you even realize it. It starts as a low murmur and grows louder with every step, wheels grinding against cobblestones, hooves clopping unevenly, voices bouncing back and forth as though the streets themselves are gossiping. The city is stretching its limbs, shaking the stiffness of the night away, and you're swept right into its yawn. The narrow lanes open into a wider street. Though wide is generous, it's just enough space for two carts to squeeze by if neither driver minds losing a wheel. A donkey snorts in irritation as its owner pulls hard at the reins, while a kid with a sack of something that smells suspiciously like onions dashes under the animal's belly without hesitation. You hold your breath and step sideways, the street barely giving you room. Above, wooden balconies lean at angles that seem to defy physics. Laundry flapping like resigned flags of surrender. The noise multiplies quickly. Somewhere a bell rings. Not the kind of solemn toll that announces doom, but a casual clang as if someone's late to the party. A rooster tries to outdo the bell, fails, and earns laughter from a group of children who are already inventing trouble for the day. There's the thud of barrels rolled off wagons, the crunch of straw being spread, and the unmistakable argument of two merchants who clearly disagree about who deserves the better patch of ground. One mainstream fact slips in quietly. In many ancient cities, especially Rome and Athens, markets were regulated by city officials called agoranomoi, or aediles. Their job was to keep things running smoothly. Weights and measures had to be fair. Stalls couldn't block roads, and spoiled food could land you in real trouble. You imagine these officials rubbing sleep out of their eyes as they march through the chaos, pretending they have everything under control while secretly wishing they'd chosen a quieter career. Maybe shepherding goats on some lonely hillside. The smells are impossible to separate. Freshly baked bread battles with the sharp tang of fish that probably should have been eaten yesterday. Piles of herbs give off soothing notes of mint and sage, but they're immediately overpowered by the sour tang of donkey dung. And of course, someone thought it would be a great idea to roast meat this early in the morning, so your stomach growls even as your nose protests. Children weave in and out of the crowd, not just for fun but for work. A girl balances a basket on her head with such grace you wonder if she was born that way, while her little brother trails behind dragging a stick across wagon wheels. Just for the joy of the sound, you can't help but smirk. Some things never change. Scholars still argue whether market days were truly daily in every ancient city or if they were more periodic, tied to religious calendars and local festivals. Some claim that the bustle you're hearing right now would have happened every morning without fail, while others insist it was more episodic, with certain days exploding into madness and others quieter. Either way, what you feel now is unmistakable, a city's pulse speeding up with each cart unloaded, each shout added to the chorus. And then there's the odd, quirky detail you stumble across. A man with a parrot perched on his shoulder, squawking insults that sound suspiciously like his own. Did parrots really wander ancient markets? In some Mediterranean ports, yes, they were exotic birds brought in by traders, and the novelty alone could draw a curious crowd. You realize you're watching the world's earliest version of street entertainment. Complete with feathered heckler, the street tightens again, forcing you into single file behind a woman balancing clay jars. They clink softly, and you wonder how many times she's made this trip, memorizing every rut in the road. Somewhere ahead, a vendor bellows a sales pitch, though you can't make out the words, just the cadence, rising and falling like music. Others join in, voices overlapping until it becomes impossible to tell where one ends and another begins. It's noisy, yes, but not chaotic in the way you'd expect. There's a rhythm to it, an unspoken choreography. Carts pull in, stalls rise, animals shuffle into place. Buyers hover at the edges, pretending they're not desperate. You notice the first sparks of haggling. Already, a man frowns dramatically at the price of figs, shakes his head like he's been personally insulted, then storms away. 2 steps later, he's back, buying twice as much as he pretended to hate. You're caught in it now. The street is alive around you, carrying you forward with the flow. The city is awake, the market is waking, and your senses, poor things, don't get a choice. Noise, smell, touch, even taste from the dust in the air. They all collide at once. You step over another puddle and realize the ancient city never gave anyone a gentle start to the day. This is it, the overture before the real symphony begins. The instruments are tuning. The chorus is humming, and soon, very soon, the market will roar into full life. For now, you're still on the edge, feeling it grow, bracing yourself for the crescendo. You squeeze into the square, just as the first stalls begin to appear, sprouting like wooden mushrooms after rain. The skeletons of the market reveal themselves quickly, rough wooden tables, dragged into position with the kind of groans that suggest they've lived longer than the merchants using them. Cloth awnings stretch overhead, tied to poles at precarious angles, catching the early light in faded colors. Some are patched so many times, they look like quilts, stitched from other people's laundry. You duck beneath one and nearly get smacked in the head by a corner post. Welcome to the marketplace, where design is less about beauty and more about surviving one more day. Merchants grunt as they unroll mats, tip baskets onto tables, and rearrange goods until they look vaguely appealing. A fisherman spreads his wares on a slab of stone, brushing flies away with a twig that's clearly not doing the job. A potter carefully sets out clay jugs, tapping each one with a practice flick to prove it isn't cracked. The sound rings through the square, hollow, solid hollow, like a rhythm only he understands. A scholarly fact sneaks in here. In many ancient cities, stalls weren't random chaos. Spaces were rented or allotted, sometimes even inherited, and families kept the same spot for generations. It gave the market a strange kind of permanence. Even though the stalls themselves looked as temporary as a sandcastle at high tide, buyers knew exactly where to find their favorite butcher or spice seller, just as you know where your coffee shop is, minus the Wi-Fi, of course. You shuffle past a man hammering nails into a wooden cart that serves as his display. He mutters curses with each blow, and you silently hope he never becomes your neighbor. Across from him, a woman arranges piles of herbs so neatly they look like green pyramids. The smell hits you. Thyme, rosemary, maybe coriander, or maybe it's just weeds dressed up for the part. Either way, it's fresher than anything else in the square. The odd detail strikes you next. A stall is covered entirely with shoes, leather sandals, simple boots, even a pair that looks far too fancy for this place. The merchant has hung them from strings, so they dangle like a bizarre chandelier. When the wind stirs, the shoes sway together, tapping lightly like a strange percussion instrument. You pause just long enough to imagine the melody of 1,000 shoes clapping for their freedom. Meanwhile, the noise rises steadily. Merchants shout greetings, sometimes genuine, sometimes more like territorial barking. Neighbors argue about how much space belongs to whom, measuring invisible lines with their hands. One man insists that 3 extra inches of ground will ruin his entire family. The city official who's supposed to keep peace strolls by, arms crossed, doing absolutely nothing beyond looking important. Scholars still argue whether these officials were truly respected or mostly ridiculed. Your observation suggests option 2. The smells grow thicker as food stalls multiply. A baker sets out trays of flatbread so hot the air above them shimmers. A butcher hangs cuts of meat from hooks, each one dripping slowly into the straw below. The aroma is both enticing and faintly alarming. You wonder how long it'll sit there before someone risks it. Children dart among the stalls, some helping, some hindering. A boy carries a basket of eggs with surprising seriousness, while another deliberately sneaks behind him, making chicken noises until he bursts out laughing and nearly trips. The eggs miraculously survive, though your heart doesn't. Somewhere else, 2 girls arrange bright cloth strips, holding them up against each other and giggling about which color looks best, as if the fate of fashion rests in their hands. You lean against a wall, taking it all in. The square now feels alive. No longer a scattered collection of tables, but a real marketplace, humming with purpose. Each stall, each voice, each smell contributes to the patchwork, and you realize there's something hypnotic about the whole process. The city wakes not in silence, but in the clatter of wood, the shuffle of feet, and the rise of voices eager to sell what they have. There's no grand design, no blueprint, just repetition worn into tradition. The same stalls in the same places, the same arguments over inches of space, the same smells mingling until no one can tell bread from fish from sweat. And tomorrow, it will happen again. Somehow that endless cycle feels comforting. The market isn't just commerce, it's ritual. And you, tucked into the corner, watching from the edge, are part of it now. Whether you buy something or not, whether you complain about the smell or laugh at the dangling shoes, the market accepts you. It's no longer a question of when it begins. It's here, unfolding, loud and unashamed, and you're caught right in its web. The noise sharpens as the market breathes in fully, and suddenly the square is alive with the music of voices sparring over coins. You edge closer to the first real haggling of the day. A woman in a faded tunic stands with arms crossed, scowling at a vendor selling figs. She shakes her head so dramatically you'd think he'd just asked for her firstborn. He counters with a shrug, his hands raised as if to say, "Look, I don't set the price." "The gods do." She storms off, muttering under her breath, only to loop back 30 seconds later, this time pretending she just happened to walk by. You can almost hear the vendor's grin. The rhythm of negotiation is oddly soothing. Buyer points at item. Seller names price with all the subtlety of a war drum. Buyer gasps in shock, clutches chest like the world has ended. Seller throws hands skyward, lamenting ungrateful customers. Then comes the sigh, the slow dance of lowering numbers, until clink coins exchange, and both walk away convinced they won. You feel yourself getting lulled by the cadence. A back and forth chant that never truly changes, no matter the century. A scholarly note slips in. In many ancient markets, haggling wasn't optional, it was expected. Fixed prices were rare, and even when marked, they were more like suggestions than rules. Some evidence suggests that refusing to haggle was seen as rude, almost antisocial. Imagine walking into a shop today, and the cashier being offended that you didn't argue over the price of milk. Nearby, a merchant selling pottery bangs a jug with his knuckles, making a hollow sound to prove it's sturdy. The customer responds by tapping his own jug, which cracks instantly. The merchant shrugs again, this time looking skyward as if asking the gods to explain why humans insist on self-sabotage. Odd detail? Some merchants kept trained parrots or even monkeys to attract customers, or to repeat phrases that pressured buyers. You glance around nervously, half expecting the parrot from earlier to squawk, "Too expensive." At the wrong moment, children join the performance too. One girl tugs her mother's sleeve, begging for a ribbon she absolutely must have. The mother frowns, waves her hand, and continues bargaining over bread. 5 minutes later, the ribbon somehow ends up tucked behind the girl's ear. You're not sure if she wore her mother down with pleading, or if the vendor simply took pity. Either way, it's a small victory in the battlefield of negotiation. The din grows until it feels like the entire city is shouting at once. Voices overlap in layers, high-pitched whines, deep-voiced commands, sarcastic laughs. You can't follow individual conversations anymore. They blur into a single chant, like waves breaking against the shore. And yet amid the noise, there's order. Merchants recognize familiar buyers. Neighbors trade gossip between haggles. And everyone somehow knows who's next in line without written rules. You drift closer to a spice seller, the air thick with cinnamon and pepper. He waves a little pouch dramatically, as though it contains secrets from distant lands. The buyer leans in, inhaling deeply, pretending to consider. The price rises with each sniff. Eventually, coins change hands, and you realize that half the art of haggling is performance, theater played out in public squares every single day. Scholars still argue whether ancient markets were primarily about trade or about social bonding. Was commerce the point, or was it just the excuse? You look around, neighbors swapping recipes, old friends loudly pretending to insult each other, young men exaggerating their strength while carrying sacks. Honestly, it looks less like business and more like a festival dressed up as economics. By now, the chorus has grown thick enough that you feel it in your chest. The back and forth haggling, the laughter, the sighs, the clinking of coins, it all merges into a steady rhythm. The market isn't just awake, it's singing. And like any song, it pulls you along until you realize you're swaying slightly, caught in its tempo. This, you realize, is how mornings in ancient markets always began. Not with silence breaking into chaos, but with chaos finding its beat. A beat built from 1,000 tiny bargains, echoing through the streets like the city's heartbeat. You weave deeper into the maze, and the market unfolds into something stranger than simple trade. It's not just about food and fabric. It's about the little extras that remind you humans never change. On one corner, a man strums a lyre with strings, so loose they buzz more than sing. He sings about love, or maybe about goats. You honestly can't tell. A couple of children dance nearby, stomping in rhythm, while passers-by toss him a coin or two, not because he's good, but because silence feels worse. Just beyond him, a storyteller draws a circle of listeners. His arms flail dramatically, his voice rises and falls, and the crowd gasps at all the right moments. You edge closer, curious, until you realize he's not narrating some epic battle. He's gossiping, just with flair. Apparently someone's cousin borrowed money from someone else's uncle, and now the family feud threatens to ruin a wedding. The crowd is enthralled. You stifle a laugh, realizing that half the entertainment is just the city's rumor mill in costume. And of course, the odd detail sneaks in. One vendor has set up a tiny cage with a lizard painted gold. He swears it's magical, capable of curing headaches if you stare at it long enough. You watch a man try, blinking rapidly while his wife looks like she's already planning to drag him away. Was the headache cured? Unclear. Was his dignity? Definitely not. You drift toward a table lined with cosmetics. Yes, cosmetics. Small jars of crushed minerals, sticks of coal, powders meant to soften the face. Women lean in to test them, smudging color across their cheeks while vendors promise eternal youth. A scholarly fact surfaces, makeup in ancient markets wasn't just vanity. It was often tied to status, even religion. Some believed painted eyes protected against evil spirits, while others simply wanted to look less exhausted. You think about your own reflection and decide maybe the ancients were onto something. The market has its tricksters too. A boy runs through the crowd with pockets suspiciously full, while a vendor screams curses about stolen figs. No one chases him. Maybe they know he'll be caught later, or maybe they've accepted thievery as part of the dance. On the flip side, some stalls advertise miracle cures, potions that promise to heal fevers, powders that supposedly stop hair loss. One old man swears by a liquid made of vinegar and herbs. He waves it so close to your nose you nearly pass out from the fumes. The smells around you shift from pleasant to overwhelming. Roasting meat mixes with fresh bread, and then, like an ambush, the sharp sting of fish left too long in the sun. You try to dodge the smell, but it follows like an uninvited guest. To cover it, someone nearby burns incense, and suddenly the air is both nauseating and holy. In the chaos, you spot another scholarly debate waiting to be chewed on. Scholars still argue whether markets were truly democratic spaces, open to anyone, rich or poor, or whether the wealthiest always tilted the scales. Standing here, it feels like both. The rich buying in bulk, the poor bargaining over a single loaf, and everyone pretending the game is fair. You pause at a stall selling second-hand clothes. The vendor boasts that each tunic once belonged to someone famous. You're not sure if that means politicians or just a baker from across town. But the patter works. A woman picks up a patched cloak, nods thoughtfully, and hands over coins. Somewhere else, another vendor sells charms made from bones, shells, even teeth. They clink together as customers rummage, the sound like a skeletal wind chime. The deeper you go, the more the market feels like a carnival. Part necessity, part spectacle. You're not just watching trade. You're watching a city perform itself. And in the performance, every voice, every scent, every absurd painted lizard plays a part. By the time you reach the center again, the noise is less startling. It doesn't crash anymore, it hums. A steady vibration under your skin, like the market has tuned itself. And now you're vibrating with it. You can almost feel your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the chorus of bargaining, gossip, and laughter. The market is awake, and so are you, but barely. You drift toward a cluster of stalls where the real heart of the market beats food. Not the neatly wrapped kind you know today, but piles, heaps, towers of it, displayed with no refrigeration and far too much confidence. Baskets of dates glisten in the sun, sticky enough to glue your fingers together. Next to them, nuts spill across the table like marbles waiting to scatter. A boy scoops them into small bags, his hands moving so fast you're not sure if he's working or performing a trick. A few steps away, bread dominates the air. Flat round loaves, some charred, some still steaming, sit stacked in uneven pyramids. The smell is intoxicating, warm and nutty, with a smoky undertone from the clay ovens. You watch a customer test a loaf by pressing it with his thumb. Satisfied, he tears off a chunk and chews without waiting to pay. The vendor doesn't blink. Apparently, tasting is just part of the process. Then comes the meat. Cuts hang from hooks, swaying like grim decorations. Flies land and are shooed, land again, shoot again. A butcher sharpens his knife on a stone with a sound that makes you wince. He grins when he notices, as if he enjoys the discomfort. A scholarly fact slips in many ancient markets, meat was butchered on the spot, sometimes even with the animal present. Buyers wanted freshness, and fresh sometimes meant still breathing. You glance at the goat tethered nearby and silently apologize for its grim future. Fish stalls line one edge of the square, their tables dripping steadily into the dirt. The smell is unmistakable. You hold your breath, then exhale, then regret both decisions. Odd detail? To prove freshness. Some vendors sprinkled water on the fish so they glistened under the sun, even if they'd been dead since yesterday. You can't help but laugh, half clever, half disgusting. And then, fruit. Grapes in big clay bowls, Pomegranates cracked open to reveal jeweled seeds. Melons sliced in half so their fragrance spills into the crowd. A woman samples a piece and then argues loudly that it's too sour to be worth the price. She spits the seeds on the ground for emphasis. Somehow her defiance draws more customers. Nothing sells better than controversy, apparently. The hum of food stalls mixes with the constant clink of coins. You catch sight of scales being used, bronze weights carefully balanced against grain. The vendor taps the scale when it tips too slowly, pretending not to notice that it favors his side just a little too often. Scholars still argue whether weights were regularly inspected by officials, or whether everyone just accepted they were being cheated. Watching the sly grin on the vendor's face, you suspect the latter. Somewhere behind you a pot bubbles. You turn to find a man ladling soup into clay bowls. The smell, lentils, garlic, maybe onions, wraps around you like a blanket. Customers sip slowly, their faces softening as though the warmth melts their worries. You realize the market isn't just a place to shop. It's a place to eat together, standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Oddly enough, the loudest shouts don't come from vendors but from buyers, bragging about their purchases. One man waves a chicken high in the air like a trophy, declaring he got it for half the usual price. The chicken flaps once, unimpressed, before accepting its fate. The deeper you breathe, the heavier the air becomes. Layers of scent pile over each other. Sweet fruit, pungent fish, smoky bread, metallic blood. It's overwhelming, but in a way that makes your head swim pleasantly. The market seems to press against your senses until you're wrapped in it completely. You step back, letting the crowd flow around you. A woman brushes past, her basket full of herbs, the leaves tickling your arm. A child darts between legs, clutching a loaf nearly bigger than his head. The flow of food feels endless, unstoppable, like the city's lifeline laid bare in the square. And you realize you could fall asleep right here, in the middle of it all, lulled not by silence, but by the steady churn of trade. The market doesn't whisper. It hums, persistent, eternal, as if promising that tomorrow will bring the same sounds, the same smells, the same endless haggling over figs. Coins jingle like rainfall as you drift toward the edges where money really changes hands. Merchants lean forward over worn wooden counters, palms open waiting for the shine of bronze, silver, or if fortune smiles, gold. You spot a man rubbing a coin between his teeth to test it, leaving a neat little bite mark that confirms authenticity better than any receipt. You can't help but smirk. Imagine trying that at a supermarket checkout today. The rhythm of trade is hypnotic. Coin drops, hand scoops, goods change sides, repeat. Some customers tuck their coins deep into cloth pouches tied at the waist. Others keep them clutched in sweaty fists, reluctant to part with even a single piece. You watch one buyer count and recount 3 coins, each time sighing heavily as though each decision carries the weight of destiny. A scholarly fact slides in here. Most ancient cities didn't rely on a single type of coin. Markets were flooded with mixed currencies, local mintings, foreign imports, even older designs that had technically gone out of circulation. Merchants often needed to act as amateur money changers, judging not just the weight of a coin, but also whether anyone else in the city would accept it. You glance at a vendor's suspicious squint and realize he's doing math in his head faster than most calculators. Odd detail? You notice a stall decorated not with goods, but with coins themselves, nailed into the wood in neat patterns. The merchant claims they're lucky coins, guaranteeing prosperity to anyone who spends freely. You realize the gimmick is brilliant. Who could resist giving money to a man who promises the universe will thank you for it? The flow of exchange is rarely smooth, though. You hear an argument break out between 2 men over a miscount. Voices rise, arms flail. A small circle gathers as though preparing for a street performance. Eventually, a third party, a woman with a basket of grapes, steps in, counts the coins herself, and settles the matter in less than 10 seconds. Both men immediately nod as though they'd never doubted her. You realize the true authority in the market might just be whoever has the patience to keep track. Elsewhere, the payments are stranger. A farmer leads a chicken to a potter, trades it for a jug, and walks away perfectly satisfied. The potter holds the bird awkwardly, looking less sure about the deal. Barter hasn't disappeared. It just lurks in the corners, ready to remind you that coins are only one way to measure value. Children sometimes act as little bankers, darting around with bags of coins too heavy for their tiny frames. One girl nearly trips, spilling a handful of bronze onto the dirt. 3 boys dive instantly, but she shrieks so loudly the crowd parts like a sea, and every coin is returned. The boys look sheepish, but the crowd cheers her victory. You can't tell if it was courage or just the lungs of a champion. Scholars still argue whether markets truly created equality through currency or whether they deepened divides. Watching here, it feels like both. Coins flow faster from the rich, drip more slowly from the poor, but every hand still has to open. Every bargain still has to end with something exchanged. The ritual is the same, whether you spend 1 coin or 100. As you linger, the clink of coins begins to blur. It doesn't sound sharp anymore. It sounds soft, like tiny bells muffled in cloth. A lull drapes over the scene, not silence, but a steadier hum, as though the market is settling into its stride. And you, caught in the rhythm, feel yourself swaying again. The sound of commerce is no longer jarring. It's oddly soothing, like the ocean or rain, or maybe even a lullaby written in metal. You drift closer to the corners of the square where the truly bizarre goods collect. The items that don't quite fit anywhere else but somehow still find buyers. One stall glitters with jewelry, not the polished kind from royal treasuries, but roughly hammered bracelets and necklaces strung with shells, glass beads, and the occasional shiny stone that might, or might not, be precious. The vendor insists every piece carries a story. This bead came from a distant desert, this shell from a sea no one has ever seen. You're skeptical, but his voice is hypnotic, and you catch yourself reaching for a bracelet before quickly stuffing your hands in your pockets. Beside him, a woman sells charms and amulets, tiny clay figures of animals, eyes painted on for protection, bones polished into pendants. She whispers promises to each buyer. This one keeps nightmares away. This one ensures fertility. This one keeps your neighbors from cursing your bread. Odd detail? One charm is clearly just a chicken's foot tied with string, but she swears it wards off evil spirits. The customer nods solemnly, clutching it like treasure. You wonder if spirits are truly that gullible. The scent changes here too. Herbs and incense fill the air, clouds of smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. A man crushes dried leaves into powder, claiming it can cure toothaches. Another stirs honey into jars, promising immortality with every spoonful. You watch a woman buy 3 jars, muttering that immortality is worth the price, even if her husband disagrees. A scholarly fact slips in. Ancient markets often doubled as pharmacies, long before pharmacies existed. Remedies ranged from genuine medicinal herbs to outright nonsense, like powdered gems or boiled animal parts. Whether they worked or not hardly mattered. The act of buying health was its own comfort. You move along and find something even stranger, a table stacked with papyrus scrolls. The seller boasts their poems, recipes, even love letters, salvaged from estates. He offers one to you, unrolling it dramatically. You can't read a word, but the script looks elegant enough to pass as wisdom. He leans closer, whispering that it's secret knowledge. You hand it back quickly before he convinces you it will change your life. Scholars still argue whether these sellers were respected for spreading literacy or mocked as peddlers of nonsense. Judging by the seller's smug grin, you suspect both were true. Nearby, animals crowd into the chaos. Chickens tied together by their legs, goats bleating indignantly, even a donkey with baskets strapped to its sides. Children giggle as they try to pet a kid goat until it sneezes directly on them. The mother scolds, but the vendor just laughs and assures her that goat sneezes are lucky. You're not entirely convinced. Odd little performances pop up between stalls. A man juggles stones, another balances a stick on his nose, hoping for coins tossed his way. A boy plays a flute so shrill you wonder if it's secretly a weapon. The market seems to tolerate everything, folding these sideshows into its rhythm without missing a beat. And then, you stumble on the most curious of all, a vendor selling exotic curiosities. Dried snakes coiled in jars, beetles pinned neatly in boxes, even a strange feather he swears came from a mythical bird. You glance at it. It looks suspiciously like a goose feather dipped in paint. Still buyers lean in, fascinated, handing over coins. It seems wonder itself has a price. The air here feels heavier, stuffed with incense, animal smells, and human curiosity. Yet somehow the oddities blend into the larger hum. You're no longer surprised to see scrolls sold next to chickens, or snake jars next to beads. The market doesn't care about categories. It thrives on the jumble, the unexpected, the endless collision of useful and useless. As you watch a woman tuck a painted amulet into her cloak with great seriousness, you realize the market isn't just feeding bellies, it's feeding imagination. And that, perhaps, is the strangest and most soothing rhythm of all. You push deeper, past the glitter of jewelry and the squawks of chickens, into a stretch that feels more like a workplace than a marketplace. Here the sound changes. Gone are the shouts of haggling voices. In their place ring the hammer, the rasp, the hiss of tools meeting raw material. You've stumbled into the craftsman's row, where things are not just sold but made right before your eyes. The first stall you pass belongs to a blacksmith. His forge glows a dull orange and sparks spit out as he pounds iron on an anvil. Each strike lands with such rhythm that you start to think of it as a drumbeat, steady and grounding against the chaos elsewhere. He's not making swords or armor, though. This isn't a warrior's shop. He's shaping nails, hinges, maybe a farming tool. Mundane, necessary, and somehow more impressive than the flashy jewelry 2 stalls back. A scholarly fact sneaks in. In many ancient cities, markets weren't just places to buy finished goods. They were sites of production. Craftsmen often worked in plain view, both advertising their skill and proving the goods were fresh. Watching a pot molded or a blade sharpened was part of the sale. It built trust and maybe a little awe. You edge over to a potter spinning his wheel with a foot pedal. Clay slicks his hands, his tunic, even the ground beneath him. He coaxes a lump into the shape of a bowl, then a jug, then something that collapses in on itself like a tired tent. He sighs but doesn't pause, just reshapes and tries again. Odd detail, to keep clay moist, potters sometimes spat directly onto their work. You catch him doing exactly that, and quickly look away before you rethink. Every jug you've ever touched. Next comes the wood carver, shavings piled high at his feet. He carves spoons, combs, and little figurines, each one smoothed lovingly by hand. Children gather to watch, pointing excitedly at animal shapes, and he rewards them with tiny chips of wood as souvenirs. They squeal with delight, as if they've been handed treasure. You can't help but smile. The scent here is different too. Less food, more earth and smoke. Burnt iron, wet clay, resin from fresh wood. It mingles into something strangely calming, like the essence of creation itself. You inhale deeply, realizing that while the rest of the market hums with buying and selling, this section hums with making. Scholars still argue whether craftsmen had higher status than traders. Were they respected for their skill, or considered just another rung in the chain of labor? Watching the proud way the blacksmith lifts each finished hinge, you feel like the answer leans toward respect, or at least self-respect. As you linger, you notice how customers interact differently here. They don't just haggle, they watch. They ask for changes, request sizes, debate whether a spoon handle should curve slightly more. The craftsman nods, adjusts, demonstrates. It's less bargaining and more collaboration. The product feels personal, shaped not just by hands but by conversation. Odd detail. You spot a young apprentice carefully sweeping away scraps of metal and clay, dumping them into separate baskets. Later, those scraps will be reused, melted, crushed, or spun into something new. Waste wasn't really an option. Every fragment found a second life, even if it became nothing more glamorous than filler for bricks. You stand a little longer, lulled by the steady clangs and whirs. Unlike the chaos of food stalls or the oddities section, this row feels almost meditative. Creation has its own rhythm, slower but no less powerful. You feel yourself softening into it, like clay under a potter's hand, shaped by the repetition. And as you leave, the sounds linger, hammer, wheel, rasp like a lullaby, written in tools. The air shifts again as you wander out of the craftsman's row and into a place that smells far more fragrant, almost intoxicating. Stalls here overflow with baskets of herbs, bundles of dried flowers, jars of powders in shades that look suspiciously like ground-up rainbows. You've entered the spice and perfume quarter, where merchants lean forward eagerly, ready to intoxicate your senses before your wallet. One man waves a pouch under your nose before you can protest. Cinnamon, sharp and sweet, hits you so hard you nearly sneeze. He beams proudly, as if your reaction proves his point. Next stall over, a woman grinds dried rose petals into fine powder with a stone mortar. She sprinkles a little into the air, and suddenly you're standing in a cloud that smells like someone bottled spring itself. A scholarly fact creeps in here. Ancient markets were hubs for long-distance trade, and spices often traveled farther than any person in the crowd had. Cinnamon, pepper, frankincense, they came across deserts, seas, even mountain passes carried by caravans that linked entire civilizations. To hold a pouch of spice was to hold a fragment of another world. Odd detail, some vendors enhanced their perfumes with very questionable ingredients, crushed insects, whale secretions, even animal fat. You glance warily at a jar labeled musk and wonder if you really want to know where it came from. The vendor, of course, swears it will make you irresistible. Perfume sellers get creative with their pitches. One man offers a tester by dabbing oil directly onto your wrist, whether you agreed or not. Another insists you must inhale deeply from a clay flask, so deeply you nearly cough your lungs out. A third just sprays a mist over the crowd, catching unsuspecting passers-by in a fragrant ambush. The result is a haze of overlapping scents, spicy, floral, musky, all mingling until your brain begs for fresh air. Scholars still argue whether perfumes were luxury items for the elite or everyday comforts for common folk. Standing here, you notice both. A wealthy woman buying oils by the flask, while a laborer pays a single coin for just a pinch of scented powder. Everyone wants to smell like more than dust and sweat, even if only for a day. Behind the perfumes lurk the true stars of this section. Spices. Pepper piled in tiny heaps, saffron threads glowing like embers, nutmeg tucked away like treasure. Merchants speak in reverent tones, as though they're priests at a sacred altar. A woman pinches saffron between her fingers, her eyes widening at the price, before sighing and buying it anyway. Some things, it seems, are too tempting to resist. Odd detail. Pepper was once so valuable it was used like currency, measured grain by grain. You spot a man holding a pouch of it as carefully as if it were gold. He ties it shut, double knots it, and tucks it deep into his tunic. His expression equal parts pride and paranoia. The smells wrap around you now, heavier than incense, deeper than bread or meat. It's dizzying, like walking through a dream where every step triggers another memory, another craving. The chatter here is softer too, not the aggressive haggling of fish or bread, but hushed voices as though the spices demand reverence. Scholars still debate whether the allure of spice was about taste, preservation, or prestige. Watching the crowd here, it feels like all three. Food, status, desire, they blur into one fragrant purchase. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the overlapping scents wash over you. Cinnamon warmth, rose sweetness, pepper sharpness. It feels like floating, like drifting in a cloud stitched together from lands you'll never see. And in that moment, the market hum softens again, settling into another rhythm. The slow, perfumed heartbeat. You drift past the perfume haze, your senses still tingling, and find yourself in a quieter, shadier corner of the market. The air feels cooler here, though maybe it's just the awnings casting wider stretches of shadow. Stomachs are growling all around you, including your own. It's midday, the sun is unforgiving overhead, and everyone's thinking the same thing: food. Vendors pivot their cries from selling goods to hawking ready-made meals. Smoke rises from small clay stoves where skewers of meat sizzle over glowing coals. The smell is enough to make you weak-kneed. You see a boy balancing a tray of flatbreads on his head, darting between stalls with the grace of someone who's clearly been doing this since he could walk. A mainstream fact sneaks in here. In many ancient cities, markets weren't just about trade. They doubled as food courts before food courts were ever a thing. Instead of going home to cook, workers and travelers grabbed quick meals here. Bread with olives, lentil stew in clay bowls, grilled fish wrapped in leaves, cheap, fast, filling. Odd detail, archaeologists have found snack bars in ancient Roman cities called thermopolia. Some of these stalls even had counter holes where steaming pots of food were kept warm. You picture yourself standing at one now, leaning on a stone counter while the vendor ladles stew into a bowl, barely looking at you because he's serving 10 people at once. Scholars still argue whether markets provided food primarily for the poor or if they catered to all classes. Looking around here, you see both. A laborer devours a bowl of porridge with his bare hands, not caring who watches. Nearby, a wealthy couple nibbles on dates, sipping watered wine from delicate cups they've brought with them, as though even eating in public must look refined. The noise is different in this food zone. Less haggling, more slurping, chewing, satisfied sighs. You pass a row where fish is being fried, and the crackle of oil almost drowns out the chatter. One man blows on a skewer impatiently before shoving the whole thing into his mouth, burning himself and cursing loudly to the laughter of everyone nearby. Children play in this section too, chasing each other with chunks of bread in their hands, crumbs falling like a trail behind them. A mother scolds her son for dripping honey down his arm, but he just grins and licks it clean. Somewhere, someone is roasting chickpeas, tossing them with herbs, selling paper cones full of crunchy, salty warmth. You stop for a taste yourself. Something simple, maybe bread with a smear of goat cheese. It's tangy, earthy, not life-changing, but satisfying. A sip of watered wine follows, cool against your throat despite the heat. You lean on a wall for a moment, watching the flow of hungry humanity. For once, everyone is united by the same need. Rich or poor, merchant or guard, child or elder, everyone eats. Odd detail: some vendors advertise their food by banging ladles on pots or singing little jingles. You hear one now, a man chanting a rhyme about lentils for strength, olives for love. Catchy enough that you might remember it tomorrow, though you doubt you'll ever crave lentils for romance. As the shadows shorten and the heat presses down harder, you realize this is the market's heartbeat at full rhythm. The morning rush of setup is over, the evening wind down is far away. Right now it's all about sustaining the crowd, feeding the chaos, keeping everyone upright for the next round of business. Scholars still debate whether these meals were truly nourishing or if they were just survival fuel. As you finish your bread and wine, you feel somewhere in between, not full, not hungry, but steady enough to keep moving. And so you step back into the throng, your belly satisfied, your senses humming, ready to see what other oddities the afternoon will bring. You slip back into the maze, but the atmosphere feels lighter now, playful almost. The serious bargaining of food and spice gives way to stalls that deal in things no one really needs, but somehow can't resist peeking at. Trinkets catch the sunlight, little glints that pull your eye like baited hooks. Here merchants shout less about survival and more about novelty. Clay figurines painted with sloppy smiles, beads strung into necklaces that look like they might break the first time you wear them, carved wooden animals that wobble when you set them down. It's as if the market suddenly remembers that people aren't just hungry bellies, but also restless minds, craving distraction. Mainstream historical fact: archaeologists often find piles of broken trinkets in market excavation sites, cheap toys, decorative pins, clay whistles. These weren't treasures meant to last centuries. They were impulse buys, forgotten as quickly as they were bought. You imagine some child begging for a whistle, playing it non-stop, and a tired parent accidentally dropping it down a drain by evening. Odd detail: some amulets were sold as protective charms against curses, carved with nonsense symbols just convincing enough to pass. One vendor here waves a tiny clay tablet at you, swearing it will guard you from evil spirits. You're not sure it would even guard you from a strong breeze. Still, the air is different here, more laughter, more chatter. A group of teenagers try on bracelets, laughing when one snaps in half. A traveling salesman peddles shells polished, so smooth they look like drops of frozen water. A juggler balances on a crate, tossing painted balls high enough to make the crowd gasp. Scholars still argue whether these oddities were luxury entertainment or just fillers between essentials. Looking around, it feels like both. Wealthier folks linger, buying charms for luck, while poorer families let their children gawk even if they can't afford anything. The market becomes theater, and the actors are the merchants themselves. You pause at a stall selling miniature clay masks, each one exaggerated with wide eyes or silly grins. The merchant insists each represents a famous actor from the city's theater. You doubt that's true. Half of them look like the same face squashed at different angles. But you still find yourself smiling. Odd detail: some stalls specialized in joke items. Dice weighted to always land a certain way. Hollow coins that hid secret messages. Even little figurines with exaggerated body parts that made people blush and giggle. You glance quickly at one such figurine and then look away before anyone sees you smirk. The sound here isn't just coins clinking, it's applause for a street performer. Laughter from a child. The sudden gasp when someone realizes they've been duped by a clever salesman. The air smells less of bread or spice, and more of dust kicked up by children running. Circles around the crowd, and though none of these goods are essential, you feel the pull. A bead necklace catches your eye, bright green against the drab browns of the market. You know it'll probably break in a week. But isn't that half the point? These little oddities exist for the fleeting joy of now, not the permanence of tomorrow. Scholars still debate whether ancient people valued these cheap goods as much as their pricier counterparts. Watching the sparkle in a child's eyes as she holds a clay whistle to her lips, squealing at the shrill sound, it's hard to argue they didn't. So you linger longer than you planned, drifting from trinket to trinket, swept up in the market's lighter heartbeat. Not every stall sells necessity, some sell delight, mischief, or simply the chance to laugh. And maybe, in its own way, that's the most essential thing of all. The mood begins to shift. As the sun slides lower, casting longer, slanted beams across the square, The lively energy of the morning and the indulgent chaos of midday have worn thin. Merchants' voices grow hoarse, their cries quieter, more resigned. Stalls that once bustled with elbows and noise now stand with smaller clusters of customers, fewer coins changing hands, fewer bargains struck. You notice shopkeepers leaning on their tables, arms crossed, eyes heavy. Bread that was golden and fresh hours ago looks dry, the crust hardening. Fish, once bright-eyed and glistening, seems tired in its own way. It scent less sea breeze and more, don't breathe too close. The day's leftovers are pushing their luck. A mainstream historical fact drifts in here. Many ancient markets operated strictly from sunrise to sunset. Without electric lights, commerce simply ebbed with the daylight. When the sun tilted west, trade slowed by default, whether or not the merchants had sold their stock. Odd detail? Some sellers actually shouted louder in the late hours, trying desperately to offload perishables before they spoiled. You hear one man now, bellowing that his figs are fresh as morning dew, even as a wasp circles lazily around one that looks closer to jam than fruit. Scholars still argue whether evening trade was seen as an opportunity for bargains or a sign of desperation. Watching a woman haggle fiercely for half the price of bread that will be inedible tomorrow, you suspect it was both. To her, it's a lucky find. To the baker, it's better than throwing it to the pigs. The market's soundscape is gentler now. The clamor of voices no longer crashes over you. It ripples in small waves. A few last-minute shoppers shuffle by, weighed down with bundles. A young boy drags a goat reluctantly through the crowd, the animal bleating like it knows the day's nearly done. You catch sight of merchants dismantling their stalls. Wooden beams creak as they're folded down, awnings pulled loose and rolled. Dust rises as baskets are lifted, and the earth underneath reveals just how much grit has settled during the day. It feels a little like watching a theater crew strike, a set after the play's final act. Odd detail, some stalls doubled as sleeping quarters at night. Instead of hauling everything home, vendors stretched blankets under their counters and curled up beside unsold wares. You glance at one weary man setting down not just a blanket but a small clay lamp, preparing to spend the night among jars of olives. The smell shifts too. The sharp perfumes and spices fade as vendors pack them away, leaving behind a mix of dust, sweat, and fading food aromas. It's not unpleasant, but it's tired, like the market itself is exhaling after holding its breath all day. Scholars still debate whether this winding down was orderly or chaotic. Here you see both. Some merchants calmly packing in silence, others bickering with customers over last chance prices, still others squabbling with neighbors about who's blocking whose cart. The human element never rests. As the sun dips further, shadows stretch long fingers across the square, wrapping around baskets and barrels like a slow-moving tide. You realize the day's rhythm is closing, the energy pooling into smaller and smaller pockets before slipping quietly away. It's not quite silence yet, but it's close, the strange lull of a city holding its breath between the chaos of daylight and the mysteries of night. The sun finally kisses the horizon, bleeding gold and crimson across the rooftops, and the marketplace softens into a different creature altogether. What was once a roaring, tangled chorus of voices now drifts into scattered murmurs. The day's dust hangs in the air, painted orange by the dying light, while long shadows stretch like dark fingers across the ground. Merchants move with weary slowness. A woman gathers her leftover figs, tucking them into a worn basket while shooing away a persistent stray dog. A potter carefully stacks unsold bowls, wrapping them in scraps of cloth so they won't crack overnight. The loud bark of fresh bread has turned into a quiet sigh as a baker sweeps crumbs from his table, the smell of stale crust lingering like a ghost. Mainstream fact, many ancient markets transitioned into evening social spaces once the bulk of trade was done. Torches and oil lamps flickered to life, not just for practical light but for companionship. People lingered here because the market was the heart of the city. When it quieted, so did everything else. Odd detail. Some vendors lit their lamps not with olive oil, but with animal fat, which smoked and smelled like burnt meat. You catch a whiff of one now. Thick, greasy, clinging to your throat, forcing you to edge away before your stomach revolts. The crowd is thinned, but it hasn't disappeared. Small knots of people remain, sitting on overturned baskets or leaning against the walls, gossiping in softer tones. Rumors flow more easily in the twilight. A soldier boasts about a skirmish on the border. Two women whisper about a neighbor who was seen buying perfume with someone else's husband. A cluster of men argue over whether the city's governor actually eats the same bread they do. Scholars still argue whether markets were more political or social in these twilight hours. Looking at the mix of chatter, you suspect it was both. Coins may stop clinking, but words never do. Children chase each other less wildly now, their energy spent. One girl plays idly with a clay whistle she begged for earlier, puffing weak notes as her mother gathers belongings. A boy sits half asleep on a sack of grain, his head lolling to one side, lips smeared with the honey he devoured hours before. The light shifts again, day to dusk, dusk to almost night. Torches flare brighter as the sky deepens to violet. A musician strums a lyre near a corner, his notes soft, meandering, the kind of tune that doesn't demand applause but simply fills the quiet. You let it carry you, the notes weaving through the slowing pulse of the market. Odd detail. Some merchants believed lighting their stalls at night kept away spirits. Others thought it invited them. A nervous-looking vendor mutters a prayer as he shields his tiny flame from the wind, his eyes darting as though expecting something unseen to answer. The smells, too, are fading. Roasted meats are gone, replaced by the faint, acrid tang of smoke. The perfumes and spices that dazzled at midday are only faint traces now, clinging to your clothes more than the air. What lingers most is the earthy scent of dust and humanity. Sweat, soil, worn leather, oil lamps. Scholars still debate whether marketplaces were ever truly empty. Even now, as you stand in the half-light, you realize they never entirely rest. Voices may lower, stalls may close, but the bones of the market still hum, waiting for tomorrow. And as night wraps itself around the city, you feel the square's transformation. It's no longer a battlefield of trade. It's a gathering place of whispers, shadows, and the slow unwinding of a day's labor. The roar has dwindled to a murmur, and the murmur will soon fade into silence. The final hush of the day settles over the market like a soft blanket. Only a few stubborn stalls remain, their owners unwilling to abandon the last coins, their voices low, almost weary. You wander through this quiet zone, noticing how different it feels. The sharp clang of metal, the spicy haze, even the children's laughter, all replaced by the gentle creak of wood and soft shuffle of tired feet. A small fire crackles in the corner where a vendor has left scraps to burn. Its warmth is faint but comforting, the smoke curling lazily toward the darkening sky. You catch the scent of charred bread, mingling with lingering spice aromas and the earthy dust of the square. There's a softness here you didn't notice before, like the city itself is exhaling. Scholars still argue whether night markets existed in every ancient city. Here, it seems unnecessary. The day has done enough work. Vendors tuck their goods carefully, sometimes wrapping clay pots or covering bundles of spices. The ritual of packing up feels deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if acknowledging that another day has passed and survived. Odd detail. A stray cat weaves through the last patrons, hopping lightly from crate to crate, inspecting leftovers as if it were the official market inspector. Someone tosses it a small piece of fish, which it devours eagerly before disappearing into the shadows. Life continues quietly even when commerce ends. You notice the final customers, a tired guard buying a small loaf, a woman collecting the last of her herbs, two men exchanging whispered gossip instead of coins. It's a different kind of transaction now, more about connection than survival. The chaos that defined the day has faded, leaving something softer, steadier, like the calm after a storm. The merchants extinguish their lamps one by one, the flames hissing as they die. The shadows deepen, blending with the corners of the square. You take a slow breath, feeling the weight of the day settle into your bones. Oddly, it's comforting. The city feels alive even in stillness, as if the market's soul lingers even when its voice is gone. A scholarly note surfaces one last time. Some historians suggest that the slow, intentional closure of markets allowed communities to bond, sharing stories, jokes, and the lingering smells of the day. Watching now, it's hard to disagree. The market is no longer a frenzy of haggling, it's memory, ritual, and connection woven together in dust and shadow. You walk slowly toward the exit, your footsteps soft against the cobblestones. A last glance over your shoulder shows empty stalls, coiled ropes and closed baskets. The echoes of laughter, bargaining, and music linger faintly as if reluctant to leave. And you realize that for all the noise and spectacle, it's these quiet moments, the smell of spent fire, the hush of packed goods, the stray cat darting through shadows, that truly capture the heartbeat of the ancient market. Soft wind down. Now, as the marketplace finally rests, you let your pace slow, your body sinking into the comfort of twilight. The sun has vanished behind distant rooftops, leaving only a faint violet glow, soft and forgiving. Shadows stretch and blend into one another, and the air carries the subtle traces of dust, burned wood, and the faint perfume of spices long packed away. You find a quiet corner to settle, leaning against a worn stone wall. The day's bustle feels like a dream. Coins clinking, children laughing, chickens bleating, all now softened into a distant hum, a lullaby you didn't know you were waiting for. Somewhere nearby, a cat curls into a basket, its soft purrs adding rhythm to the fading murmur of the market. Your eyelids grow heavy as the evening cools. The warmth of baked bread, the tang of herbs, the faint smoke from dying fires, all wrap around you like a familiar blanket. You notice how small details, the sway of a cart, the whisper of a last conversation, seem amplified in this quiet, grounding you in the present. Odd, trivial things now feel monumental, and you realize that the heartbeat of the city is as gentle as it is unstoppable. The sounds of people leaving, doors closing, and lamps extinguishing fade into soft echoes. You breathe slowly, letting the calm wash over you. The chaos of the day, the jostling, the bargains, the oddities all melt into memory, leaving only the gentle pulse of life and the quiet satisfaction of witnessing it. Scholars may debate the significance of markets, their commerce, and their social roles. But in this moment, it doesn't matter. You are here, you have seen, you have listened. Let your thoughts drift, carried by the hum of ancient city life winding down. Feel the cool air brush your cheeks. Imagine the smell of earth, bread, and faint incense lingering in corners long after the people have gone. Let it carry you into that space where sleep tiptoes in softly, as gentle as the last flicker of a dying torch. And as you let your eyes close, imagine the market in all its quiet glory, resting just like you. No more clamor, no more rush, just the soft embrace of night. You're safe here, in this memory, in this gentle echo of human life. Breathe deep, drift slow, and let the ancient city cradle you until dreams take over completely.